welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm Cha Sang-mi. The second North Korea-U.S. summit is just a few days away, and Vietnam's capital, Hanoi, has become the focal point of global attention. Today, we discuss the potential deals that the two leaders could agree on and examine U.S. views on its second summit with North Korea. For that, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
The second Kim-Trump summit slated to be held on February 27th to the 28th is just around the corner. In Hanoi, last-minute preparations are being made to welcome the two leaders where the historic summit takes place. Earlier, Kim Chang-sun, a senior official of North Korea's State Affairs Commission, arrived in Vietnam ahead of the summit to check potential places that Chairman Kim can visit during his stay. According to their routes to and from Hanoi, the delegation headed north of the Bangneun province, where a smartphone producing line owned by Samsung Electronics is located. Meanwhile, both the U.S. and North Korea are continuing to negotiate on the agenda of the second summit and wrapping up last-minute details of their joint declaration. Many are wondering what additional measures can be included in the deal, in addition to North Korea's dismantlement of its nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. Potential concessions that the U.S. could reportedly offer include a liaison office, a peace declaration, and regime preservation. The U.S. State Department said that if Chairman Kim fully implements his promise to denuclearize North Korea, America will correspond with measures that are beyond expectations, raising the possibility that a big deal can be achieved during the summit. President Moon Jae-in also expressed his anticipation for a potential big deal.
제2차 북미정상회담에서도 비핵화와 북미관계 정상화에서 큰 진전이 있을 것으로 전망을 합니다. 싱가포르 공동성명의 구체적이고 가시적인 이행이 빠르게 진행될 수 있을 것이라고 기대하고 있습니다.
On this week's The Point World Affairs, we project the possible outcomes of the second summit and discuss the divided public opinion in the U.S. ahead of the summit.
So, Professor, back in the Singapore summit last June, there were 4 items that were discussed between the two leaders. But this time, they say that more than a dozen agendas are on the table. Do you say that perhaps the expectations and the tasks ahead of the summit this time are quite big?
Yes, I think it has been very specific deals between, Special Representative Biegun and Kim Hyok-chol. You mentioned, right, that there are almost 12 agenda that they're talking about. I think pretty much they will focus on the denuclearization of North Korea and what will be the corresponding measures by the United States. But I think they have to talk about how those agenda will be linked together. I think that's the focal point we have to take a look at and see how the 4 pillars that they have agreed in Singapore might be coming up with more detailed agreement this time.
The past month or so, the two sides have been really laying the groundwork for this summit, especially, as you mentioned, Stephen Biegun flew over to Pyongyang to discuss the issues, from February 6th, I remember. And also they started their working level talks in Hanoi. But so what do you think will be in the joint declaration between the countries?
I think it's too early to tell, but I think 4 pillars would be the main topic. But I don't think talking about the permanent peace regime in the Korean Peninsula is too early. At least there should be some amount of denuclearization before they talk about the peace regime in the Korean Peninsula. So I think mainly 2 issues they will focus on. First one is how the two countries' relationship will be upgraded this time. For example, a lot of possible agreement is that they will establish the liaison officer in both countries' capital cities. I think that will be the first one. I think the second one is pretty much focused on the denuclearization. I don't know how they will come up in this summit meeting, but I think the U.S. position is that there should be some substantial measures for denuclearization in order for the states to give some kinds of lifting to North Korea. So would that be possible and possibly included in the agreement? I think that's the one that we have to take a note of.
So would that be possible? What do you think?
Let's take a look at what happened in the past, especially in the six-party talk. They had two, implementation steps. In the first step, which is called the February 13th agreement, the six-party talk, they have agreed upon the capping and destroying the nuclear facilities, which is Yongbyon. And at the time, Sung Kim, the special representative, was in Pyongyang to take a look at the, Yongbyon, tower to be destroyed. Second one, which is October 3rd agreement, was about disabling the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. And they have agreed upon the declaration of all the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. But that has not been implemented because North Korea and other parties have not, come up with how they would implement that kind of declaration. So I think that this time they have to come up with the level that they have agreed upon in the six-party process, which means that maybe they have to agree on the verification or declaration. That's what U.S. wants. But I don't think North Korea is ready for it yet. I mean, North Korea thinks that, and have been mentioning, even from this speech, New Year's speech, Kim Jong-un has been mentioning that it's now the U.S. turn to do something and keep asking the U.S. to lift the sanctions. So I'm not sure if that kind of preemptive measures by North Korea would be possible. Let's take a look at that.
Right. The role of the U.S. is definitely really big in this role of peace process. But of course, when we look at the United States alone, it has a lot of domestic political issues inside right now. And some commentators are saying that President Trump and Pompeo, Secretary of State, they have been going to a lot of press briefings answering questions about North Korea issues ever since North Korea and the summit in Hanoi was announced. So do you think perhaps they're trying to turn the attention away from this domestic politics?
Yes, President Trump is very much aware of what is going on domestically in the United States. So what he has been talking is about two things. First, things are going well. He has been done very, very good job, good achievements, and things will be done okay. I mean, he has done, tremendous achievement. Like ever since he has been talking with North Korea, there have not been any testing of nuclear weapons, any testing of ICBMs, and there is peace in the Korean Peninsula. If he did not, begin talks, there would have been Third World War in the Korean Peninsula. All that kind of, positive achievement he has been talking. And second thing is that he has been talking about some low expectation about the second summit meeting. He would not be pretty much pressured by timing issues, and it will take a long time, no pressure to bring the outcome in a short-term period. He already has been in a good position because he has achieved no testing of nuclear weapons and ICBMs of North Korea. All the good things are enough. So all the kind of things, kind of lowering the expectation before the summit meeting, so that even though there would come not enough outcome, I think he has to talk something in the United States domestically. So yes, Pompeo, Secretary Pompeo and President Trump all together are aware of domestic politics, because I think he has to use these kinds of things as his legacies. That he has been even talking about the, Nobel Prize. Prime Minister Abe recommended Nobel Prize nominee for him. All that kind of stories is, he's trying to use that for domestic politics, definitely.
This summit in Hanoi has significant implications for both Chairman Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump, as one seeks economic development while the other has his eyes locked on re-election. President Trump, who stressed that he's in good terms with the North Korean leader, is seemingly optimistic about the success of the second summit.
I hope we have the same good luck as we had in the first summit. A lot was done in the first summit.
All the while, he says there's no need to rush negotiations with North Korea. Experts are interpreting this as a conscious remark made in light of criticism that negotiations with North Korea had produced no tangible results so far.
Well, I'm in no rush for speed. We just don't want testing. The sanctions, as you know, remain. Everything is remaining.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recently met with a delegation from South Korea's National Assembly visiting Washington. She expressed skepticism about the ongoing talks, saying that the Singapore meeting was merely a show and that more proof is needed rather than empty words. As such, public opinion is split in the U.S. between those who argue that denuclearization negotiations with North Korea has made little to no progress, and those who claim that the Trump administration has achieved exponentially more than the previous administration.
To glean more information, we now connect to an expert in the U.S. Joining me now is Todd Lindberg, a senior fellow at Hudson Institute specializing in national security issues. Thank you for joining us, Todd.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Tell us how you would rate President Trump's foreign policy towards North Korea. Opinions are quite split in the U.S., I hear.
Yeah, they are very much split. A lot of it, I think, is a general product of the polarization that Trump provokes in general. So I think if you look more carefully at the North Korea policy, a year and a half ago, there was a fair bit of alarm, obviously, with Trump and Kim Jong-un rattling each other's cages and really speaking in really quite apocalyptic, violent terms. Now, however, we actually have a genuine diplomatic process going, and it seems to me that that is a big change. I think it's a serious process. I think it's designed to achieve what has long been the United States' objective, namely denuclearization and a final settlement in the peace agreement. And it's sometimes difficult, I think, for critics of Trump to look seriously at what he's trying to achieve.
What would the success of this Hanoi summit, the second Kim-Trump summit, mean for the American foreign policy?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to say is that a success is by no means a certainty. This is a process. When we think about where we are, where we've been with North Korea, we are so far away from anything like normal relations that small steps are probably going to have to precede big achievements. And I think there's an awareness on the part of negotiators on the U.S. side, the chief negotiator, Stephen Biegun, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, that if they're going to fulfill the vision of President Trump seriously, which is to say actual denuclearization, that it's going to take time. There will have to be confidence-building measures. There will have to be steps along the way. And, of course, there can't be any sort of final set of sanctions relief, recognition, et cetera, until the denuclearization piece is in place and verifiable.
Some commentators are saying that President Trump is actually using perhaps this meeting, this summit with North Korea, as some kind of political leverage to win his next term. Do you think a successful summit with North Korea will actually help him gain more support from the American public?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think he would certainly like to have a major foreign policy success to point to. But I don't think that that's the only thing that he's really looking at here. There's a lot of stuff going on domestically here. As you know, this is a very polarizing president. He's made it. He's made the office in a way about him with his tweeting, et cetera. So there's going to be a lot of domestic considerations working here. Wouldn't hurt, I think, to have. If he has some kind of foreign policy victory on his plate of achievements. But I don't think that that's by itself going to make the election move one way or the other. It's going to, I think, be more on a more fundamental basis.
Thank you very much. That was Todd Lindberg, a national security expert in Washington, D.C. Now, Professor Kim, what did you think about Professor Lindberg's analysis? Do you think that the Trump administration is approaching North Korea in a different way from his previous Obama administration?
Yes, I think he made the right choice. I mean, so critics on Trump administration might say differently, but of course, there is a big difference between Obama and Trump's foreign policy and North Korea policies. Take a look at what happened in the, President Obama period in which there was a financial crisis, global financial crisis, the President Obama's focus should have been was on the domestic issues, domestic economic recovery. So he didn't really have much leeway to take care of North Korea at the time. So-called strategic patience was something that President Obama did, but that itself is not a policy, but it's something that he did not really have much leeway, much time, much energy to take care of North Korea at the time. But, I think President Trump is different. He is very preemptively and actively talking with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and taking care of Kim Jong-un. Maybe a lot of press media said that, first time, when two President Trump and Obama met before Trump begins his, period, the first thing that Obama told Trump was the North Korean threat. So maybe that might be the reason that Trump is really, making this North Korea case as his priority. But yes, definitely there is a big difference between Obama and Trump's North Korea policies.
Okay, and President Trump hinted at a possibility of a small deal. And this is not particularly good for South Korea or the surrounding countries like Japan or China as well, because, we are within the range of North Korea's mid-range missiles. But, when we consider the benefits for the United States, it is very likely that President Trump will only focus on the ICBMs. What do you think about that?
I kind of think a little bit differently. First, I don't think North Korea would easily give up its ICBM to the United States. ICBM, from the North Korean perspective, is a very important diplomatic tool vis-a-vis the United States. Because they have ICBM, they can threaten the United States, and that's why U.S. is coming and talk with North Korea. If they have not come up with ICBM, I'm not sure if the U.S. would be really actively talking with North Korea. And secondly, removing ICBM would not make the United States safe. The transfer of nuclear weapons from North Korea to other terrorist group also is a threat to the United States. The terrorist group, by having nuclear weapons from North Korea, can have terrorism inside the United States. So that itself is, I think, a bigger problem for the United States than the ICBM of North Korea. So I don't think the ICBM, North Korea would give ICBM to the United States at the first hand, and I don't think the U.S. will be satisfied with removing ICBMs in dealing with North Korea. So I think this is, from my perspective, not the item that would be included in the small deal.
Okay, we'll get back to the results of the summit after we connect to another expert. So we connect to another expert for our discussions in Honolulu this time. Joining us now is Ralph Kosa, President Emeritus of Pacific Forum. Good to see you again, Ralph.
Oh, my pleasure.
What projections are being made in the U.S. on the best and worst case scenarios of the summit?
Well, I think the best case scenario is to come away with a mutually agreed upon definition of denuclearization and a timetable to get there from here. I'm not sure anybody expects that to happen, but that would be the best case. The worst case is for them to sort of declare a success when there really isn't one, and North Korea continues developing its nuclear weapons, and we seem to be satisfied with just a halt in testing. Which doesn't get us anywhere beyond where we are today as far as getting closer to denuclearization.
The entire international community is keeping close tabs on this development of this Hanoi summit, but there are continuous skepticisms in the media inside the U.S. So why do you think they're continuously being doubtful about this?
Well, I think, people have been dealing with North Korea for a long time. And we've seen this movie before. And we get up to a certain point, and then when it's time to verify things and to actually move forward, the North Koreans pull the rug out and start all over again. So I think, it doesn't mean that this time won't be different. But I think anyone that's spent much time dealing with North Korea has to be a skeptic. And I think skepticism is healthy at this point.
President Donald Trump has hinted at economic cooperation with North Korea or investments to Pyongyang. What do you think the American companies will think about this?
Well, I'm not sure there are a lot of American companies that are eager to go rushing into North Korea. But, I think there are probably South Korean companies that are ready to do that. And you need to open up the current sanctions in order to allow that. So I think that, we've promised North Korea a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Unfortunately, in the past, the North Koreans have taken the gold, but we haven't gotten to the rainbow, and that's been the problem. But clearly, there needs to be incentives for the North to denuclearize. Part of those are security. They need to feel secure enough to do it, and then part of it is economic. And essentially, to pay them to do good things as opposed to just paying them to stop doing bad things. I think that's where we have to make the difference.
Thank you. That was Ralph Cosa, President Emeritus of Pacific Forum. Now, Professor, what do you think about this point that Ralph has just made about incentives that should be given to North Korea, especially in terms of economic cooperation or investments?
Yeah, I think that's something Kim Jong-un wants. One of the reasons that the dialogue between two countries began possible was because Kim Jong-un's dual policy, nuclear and economics. His focus became economics, not nuclear this year. So that is the big initiative that made the dialogue possible. So I think the best negotiation tactic with North Korea is to give something to North Korea that Kim Jong-un needs most, which is economic incentive, and that's why he wants the sanctions to be lifted. But I'm not sure what would be the position of the United States if sanctions are lifted. As Ralph said, that the South Korean companies might be ready to invest in North Korea. But the problem is, after sanctions lifted, it will be all other companies, not the U.S. companies, maybe some U.S. companies, but all other countries' companies. And what will be the role of the United States then? Might be only focused on the relationship between North Korea and the United States, might have to focus on the permanent peace regime in the Korean Peninsula. But what would the Trump government has to do after sanctions are lifted? What kind of economic incentive the U.S. government can give to North Korea? So that will be the point that we have to take a look at. Maybe Kim Jong-un might think that, sanctions are lifted. What can you do? Maybe the U.S. government can do anything, further for North Korea, and maybe Kim Jong-un might not be really energetic about having a deal with the Trump government anymore.
There are different terms, CVID, FFVD. So do you think these denuclearization plans are actually possible in long term?
It all depends upon what Kim Jong-un's intention is about. And secondly, it all depends upon if Kim Jong-un thinks that his regime is solid. Okay, first thing, would Kim Jong-un really willing to give up its nuclear weapons? Maybe or maybe not. Let's assume that sanctions are lifted, economic support has been given, North Korea is finally developing economically. Then what next? The very economically rich North Korea, would that make Kim Jong-un safe? That's the first question we have to think about. And second one is that if the U.S. gives some kinds of measures to guarantee his regime, would Kim Jong-un really feel that he's secure? Would only the United States be the threat to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un? What kinds of other threats might there be? If North Korea becomes a very rich country, North Korean people might think differently. Oh, we are rich, okay? A lot of information that we'll gather. Maybe they will begin to compare their economic situations with South Korean people's economic situations. Would there be any possible threat of North Korean people's mindset to Kim Jong-un? What if North Korean people think that, okay, I'm rich, but I don't like Kim Jong-un regime. We want democracy. What if that kind of thing happens? So the future is not certain for Kim Jong-un. Maybe we have to think about that. Our efforts is to make Kim Jong-un think differently, but the future is always uncertain. Let's see how it goes.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
We're just days away from another historic summit, yet a lot of skepticism still remains within the United States. The entire world is patiently waiting to see whether President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will be able to dispel the many concerns at their second meeting in Hanoi. That's all we have for this week's The Point World Affairs. Thank you for tuning in and see you again next week.